2014 will go down as the warmest year around the globe in recorded history.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Your show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
The rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hey guys, it's Cree here again, and I'm taking you with me on the road to COP25, which is fast approaching to take place in Madrid. I'd like to acknowledge that today's episode is being recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. As I'm getting prepared to go to the COP, I'm learning a lot about the UNFCCC itself, the significance of the COP amongst the international climate regime and all the different participants involved. Whilst it's broadly accepted that representatives from the governments of nation-states are the ones who are involved in formal negotiations, they aren't the only ones with important roles at the COP. Perhaps it could be said that governmental ambassadors are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to those representing nation-states. Today I'm here with Jimmy Nails to discuss the role of non-governmental organisations, or NGOs, at the UN COP25. Jimmy and I have been mates since we met at the Australian Marine Conservation Society years ago. Himself and other members of the society have shared so much with me over the past 6 years about marine conservation and threats faced by Australia's marine ecosystems. My time with AMCS has played a big part in where I've ended up today, and for that I'm so grateful for the countless hours we've spent campaigning together. Up until a few months ago, Jimmy was an enormous part of AMCS as a marine campaigner, and will remain so for the foreseeable future. Today we're here on the eve of one of his big adventures to Tasmania, which I'm sure we'll hear more about later. So Jimmy, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me and have a chat. So, the ocean for you, what is it?
Yes.
You spend a lot of time working towards preserving the ocean, and I'd love to hear more about what drives you to dedicate so much time and so much of yourself towards marine conservation.
Cool. Well, I think it's like two-pronged. And it starts from not being able to handle the Victorian summer. Mm-hmm. And so I would spend my summers inside or at the coast, basically. And so we were pretty fortunate growing up. We were able to go to down the beach, like either the locally Morning Peninsula or, the Tassie where I'm heading. And so we were always by the coast, and I think that was lucky. And I was able to, my appreciation just continued to grow. As I would get older, and I learned more about what ecosystems were, or how unique the southern coastline of Australia in particular is, and that I guess got to that sort of threshold, right? And then I fell over that, and I was like, okay, I have to just dedicate my life to this. So my sister lived down in Warrnambool, and I lived down there too, and I was rangering for a while. In Gratian Road and Warrnambool and stuff. So, and I think the more I learnt about it, and the more I sort of, fell in love with the coast and the marine environment, and the more I then started to discover the threats, I guess. And I wouldn't obviously talk about those, but yes, when I really started to appreciate what threats are facing our marine environment, I was like, okay, advocacy needs to be my way, I guess. Yeah.
And I think that was a similar thing with me, was that you kind of get to a point and you can't ignore what you're seeing, and what you're seeing change in marine environments is quite confronting at times. So
big time. I know, it's in the news right now, but there's been the short-tailed shearwaters, and they're been sort of taking quite a hit, population-wise, quite a lot washing up there, and so we're still trying to figure out what's going on with those specifically. But that was also happening when I was in Warrnambool in 2014, and that was the same sort of one of those years where there's just they got massively hit. And as well at the same time you got plastics washing up, and again the short-tailed shearwaters and Lord Howe and stuff getting hammered from plastics. So when you sort of really realise it's sucked in that hole of.
So no going back now.
No.
Yeah, cool. So during your time working with AMCS, what were your main focuses?
My main focus was I was a campaigner, and I worked nationally out of Brisbane, Melbourne and Darwin, different times. But I focus on marine parks and plastic pollution principally. A bit of time with the reef team as well. Volunteering with the reef team on weekends as well. Yes. But no, so marine parks, so I guess just like national parks on land, national parks on water, right? And those campaigns were state, territory and nationally focused. And the main one was federal or national network of marine sanctuaries. So for those listening, I guess, but 2012 Australia created the largest network of marine parks and marine protected areas. And then with the change of government in 2013, they were suspended and underwent a review. And then in 2018, those cutbacks were instigated, I guess is the right word, but they were, basically the cutbacks occurred, and so we were campaigning against that, I guess. And then plastic pollution as well. So helping AMCS grow our plastics campaign, and I guess that was over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's national, and again, I delve into that in more detail, but principally focusing on single-use plastics and getting some federal movement on stopping plastics from being in our ocean.
Yeah, definitely a problem that is not going away anytime soon. So
no, and the plastics is an interesting space, right? Like in that, and I mean, even though David Attenborough talks about this, how it was the issue of plastic pollution for like a few decades, but really in the last 5 years, it seems to have sort of exploded into both like a community sort of awareness around it, and then in some parts of the world more than others, of course, but government action in regards to stopping plastics from getting into our oceans or existing at all. And it's been a real interesting space to be really focusing on it for the last 7 or 8 years, I guess. And trying to thought, but plastics is it's a unique sort of space, I guess.
I did a lot of beach cleans when I was working in Malaysia last year, and that was like, just huge, like more plastic than you could ever imagine, just covering beaches, and not even only the beaches, it was like 10-20 meters into the jungle behind where the water was coming up to. So during the monsoon season, like waves of plastic were just hitting the beaches and left there until people could access that point again. And we spent months cleaning different beaches around these islands. I remember one beach clean, we got over 900 plastic bottles in an hour.
Gosh. Yeah, wow.
1 hour, and it's like you're not even standing on the ground on these beaches. It's like you're standing on layers and layers and layers of rubbish, and it's coming from all over the place. Like plastic bottles we picked up were from Vietnam, Malaysia. So it's, I think, this issue of plastics, like it's really hard to address, because once it's in the ocean, it doesn't belong to anyone or any country anymore. Like it's in the currents.
There's no borders in the ocean.
And then somebody else ends up having to deal with it, or it ends up impacting marine life. So
and that's something that's been really brought to our attention over the last this year, is that Australia, so the majority of plastic pollution within our waters, it comes from Australia, and it's pretty a firm fact through CSIRO. But what's interesting is that so you mentioned Malaysia, and so like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines and likes, it sort of comes to light that a lot of the plastic pollution is actually being shipped there from other countries, right? And so in Australia, we people are using these plastic items, whatever they might be, and sometimes with really good intentions, they think they're being recycled or they think they're being disposed of, quote unquote, appropriately. And yet then the people who are dealing with that plastic pollution are just sending it overseas, selling it for dirt cheap. And so they're sending it to places that don't have the facilities to handle their own rubbish. And now they're getting copying ours as well. And I think it's there's quite a fire in AMCS's belly, as it were. We just found that was a pretty disgusting legacy that ultimately the governments are letting happen, right? And when people in plastic pollution, but when people act and they're thinking they're acting in an appropriate way, but then they're actually being let down by those that are handling the pollution. So there was some really good reporting, probably mid this year, that was like bringing that to light. And yeah, I think it's the more people know that, the better, right? And it really does help to turn the light back onto state, territory, and federal governments and like how they're allowing this to be just shipped overseas. Yeah, especially when certain politicians try and blame it on overseas, right? You know, it's not our problem; it's overseas' problem, but we're contributing massively to it. So, you know, deal with your own backyard first before you start blaming other people.
Exactly. Yeah. Big challenges ahead. But I guess I wanted to ask, like, what was the best, or what has been the best part about working in the environmental space?
Meeting awesome volunteers like you, Cree.
No,
100%. It's people, right?
Yeah.
I think my time with AMCS, who AMCS people listening at home, I miss you deeply and madly. I've worked in different capacities, I guess, like NGO, so AMCS, state government, so Victorian government, as a ranger, private businesses in land sort of management and ecology. You could say almost like my personal business, even though it's not, but making tracks, one day, hopefully. So looking at environmental sort of work, movement, conservation from different angles. But ultimately the best part of that is being able to facilitate environmental protection with communities, and that could be from helping my dad re-veg the front yard. So like you see out there, like all of those plants, the native plants, like they were planted over like 4 to 5 years. And so like working with Dad on how do we slightly restore an otherwise like a paddock that was kind of useless. And so like on a various localized level to AMCS and sort of shaping the rhetoric around how we talk about and deal with single-use plastics, for example. So it's quite a broad scope, but ultimately it's working with people. And I had a wicked team at AMCS and other places I've worked, of course. But AMCS was grand, and so to go to work every day with those folk was pretty cool. But the folk make it, and I think that's like with most businesses, most places you work, right? You connect with people around you, and that's what you that's what you love.
And I think it's very important when we're dealing with these pretty heavy environmental issues to have a good support network that you're working with, because there are days when you can just feel so deflated and let down and frustrated that at times it can feel like nothing's moving, nothing's changing, and everything, the climate is just like rapidly and unrelentlessly changing around us. So I think it's really important to be surrounded by people, and I think that's a lot to do with what I love about being in the environmental space as well, as the connections that you form are very deep and long lasting.
It must be like when you are like emotionally invested, right? And when someone is emotionally invested in something and then you find someone else who is the same, like it's you make those emotional connections. Not quite the same as going and buying a newspaper from local shops. Like it's you're talking about some serious environmental issues.
Actually, like that was something that my friends, like I've got an awesome group of friends at uni who we kind of giggled at ourselves the other day because we'd gone to the pub and then, you know, everyone's kind of celebrating after semester exams and whatnot, and for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, but we always kind of, you know, get talking about environmental issues, and then it just gets darker and darker, and then we're like in the corner of the pub being like, guys, none of us should have children. Like, this is the only thing that's going to be fair for the next generation. And then you kind of have to pull yourself back from that and realize, okay, like we're in a pub celebrating. These
That's right. Like where those support networks can hopefully drag you out of those situations.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I guess on that note, what has been challenging for you working in the environmental space?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm not working anymore. So I think, I've taken like a time away from my career, and because it's pretty intense right now. And so working in federal politics in particular, and then going through like a pretty hectic federal election, and then not seeing the best policy outcomes for our environment out of that election was kind of was pretty tough. And then I guess just working for 5 years or whatever in the campaigning space, it's pretty full on. So but it ties back to what we said anyways, like about like when you're emotionally invested in something, you get emotionally tired. So
definitely.
So and to be fair, like having spoken with a lot of folk in MCS, but other NGOs and the likes, it's like emotionally invested, and you do get drained and tired and burnt out, if you will. But it's nice when it has been nice for myself, but for some of my peers to respect taking time out. And that was sort of tough for me because I was like, the climate crisis is ridiculous, and I'm going to Tassie, but Tassie was burning down 12 months ago, and that just threw me massively in large parts of temperate rainforests that don't burn, and so and not to mention other things, but like that's probably not I think that's a natural thing for humans to bear, and then but also like taking a step back is quite difficult because you know what's going on, right? So I think despite how tough it's been, it's also great having peers that say, yes, take time and look after yourself. And I guess it could be applied to anyone, right? And I think we chat about later, but like with folk, individuals and communities and what they can do. Like, actually, I'll talk about that later. Yeah, that's toughest.
No, it is tough. And thank you for sharing, because I think that is like really so important for everybody to acknowledge that, the more you know about these issues and the more you kind of realize how intertwined everything is, all these systems interacting with each other and reaching tipping points, like it is a lot to bear. And when you start losing sleep at night on something that you're working day in, day out on, and it still feels like nothing's changing, it can be just
and how long can one maintain that energy? And that's different for everyone, right? Some people can do it for weeks, months, years, whatever it might be, but knowing your threshold, and when you've gone past that, it's taking that time out to chill out. Hey Dad just walked in, we can edit that out.
Cool. So I guess I'd love to hear about the roles that NGOs play in the international climate regime. Do you know much about that, and has this kind of shifted recently?
I guess to preface that I haven't directly worked in the international NGO space. That said, AMCS does have a myriad of involvements with international committees, and so World Heritage Committee, and I'm not actually sure if we're directly involved with COP this year. I couldn't find that out. They are?
I'm not 100% sure,
Okay.
but I can wear my badge.
Okay, yeah, great. I'm not too sure on that, but and obviously like international whaling committees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So have lengthy chats with folks that have participated in those events. My understanding is that there's an NGO role in the international space is very similar to what our role is, or what NGO's role is in a national, state or territory base or sort of aspect, in that the contemporary NGO is there to call out the government when the government isn't telling the complete truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a nice way of putting it. And so I have worked on campaigns through AMCS and others where things had occurred that, the government didn't tell the entire truth, or chose select facts that would support their argument, but overall they weren't as strong, or they weren't strong at all when it comes to marine conservation. That seems to be the role in Australia, and I'm sure in other countries as well, depending on the government at the time, I guess. And then on the international level, so participating in COP, I guess it's the same. So NGOs go along and government representatives, bureaucrats and likes go along. And so it's ensuring that there is that independent voice that check governments. And that's the beauty of living in and participating in democracy, is that you can and we can have those bodies like NGOs.
So how has the role of NGOs in this space kind of
That's
shifted recently? Do you think
Yeah.
changes?
I don't know. I suppose looking at sort of international space, and specifically with climate and global warming, and how it's sort of like exponentially getting worse almost. Well, maybe not exponentially specifically, but it is getting worse, and its general populace is more and more on board and wanting serious action in the space, and not all governments around the world are acting with that sort of like pure, like honestly in mind. Like there's clearly differences between how government A is going about it and government B and C and D. And so with the NGOs, some very strong science on their side. What was it the other day? 11,000 scientists signing the climate paper. Like there's some serious momentum there from the general populace and from the scientific community. And so the role of NGOs internationally, I guess, ever important if governments aren't wanting to act appropriately. So yeah, I mean, there's always work for NGOs to do, right? It's like, it seems that always important and crucial that there's that independent voice.
Yeah, and I think that's really pertinent to note at the moment with everything that's happening in Chile. Like, this conference was supposed to take place there, and because of that nation's population standing up for what they believe in, saying that the government is not serving them, the result, I mean, okay, it's true to say that it's not safe there right now, but to cancel the conference because of that, because of what the people are, standing up for what they believe in, is like, it's really heartbreaking. And I just wanted to say on that note, if you are unaware of what is currently unfolding in Chile, the kinds of violence and silencing that the people of Chile are facing, then I implore you to go and educate yourself. Don't feel bad about not knowing what's going on over there, because it's not really being shared amongst the mainstream media, and there's like a lot of political reasoning behind that. So I know that there's some really great organisations here in Australia called Chile Woke Up, and I've got some really inspiring friends here in Australia who are rallying very hard for the people in Chile, and I would really I know that they and everybody in Chile would really just appreciate as much global support as possible for the kinds of issues that they're facing. I mean, I feel so lucky and fortunate to still be able to go. The conference got shifted to Madrid just a couple of days later.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important perspective to bring, because it now means that, you know, people from developing nations or certain countries that need visas to enter into Spain, like, they're not going to be represented at this global conference anymore.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think it's just important to, you know, sit back and check yourself and recognise, you know, why you're going and what you're standing for. I'm going with an organisation who's providing some really great opportunities for young people to have these opportunities in policy and governance. And
No, it's pretty awesome. Because people would have been planning for it to be in Chile for what, you know, a year or more, and you know, we're not all made of cash, and so the logistical nightmare of putting together a conference, and then at the sort of like 11th hour and 59 minutes, it's like, okay, we're changing it to another country, and for these reasons, a very political reason, right? And then that did close doors on, I don't know specifics, but it has to have. There's people that, you know, can't afford to get there, so they're not able to be represented in a strictly global issue, right? So you want everyone at the table, because it impacts everyone from North Pole to South.
So I guess I'm going to kind of bring the voice of youth to the table, but not necessarily just from Australia. You know, I feel really passionate about being able to bring the views of global youth, and I'm sure there's going to be, I know for a fact there's going to be a lot of young people there who have now more than ever very loud voices into governmental conferences. So I'm excited.
Yeah, totally. It could be amazing crew.
So this year's COP is being called the Blue COP. So it's got a big focus on marine resources, the oceans, what's happening in coastal communities, everything like that. So what do you think should be like things that are discussed as a priority with regards to marine conservation at the COP this year?
So climate change or global warming and our marine environment. Well, let's look at like Australia to start with, right? So like 2016, 2017, dual back-to-back bleaching events on the reef, and massive coral mortality. In 2016, Gulf of Carpentaria, you know, like hundreds of mangroves, like mangrove die-off. Flying over the Gulf I flew over the Gulf then, moving to Darwin, but it's just, you know, you're seeing this grey landscape rather than a wonderful green mangrove thriving landscape. 2010, 2011, the seagrass die-offs in Shark Bay, so like World Heritage again, like 90% of seagrass or something die off. Giant kelp in Tasmania, you know, like a place where I'm going, and like areas that I love to snorkel and or dive. Giant kelp is gone. I think it's down to like 5% of its range from only a couple of decades ago. And, you know, the specifics on that I think aren't quite determined. I might be wrong, but there's definite impacts there with like the increase in the strength of the East Australian current, and that's shifting species. So you got species well out of their range, and then when you have an ecological imbalance already, then they, habitats aren't as resilient as they could be. So I guess if we're looking at COP, long-winded answer. If we're looking at COP, and so it's the blue COP, right? So they're talking about the oceans and impacts on oceans and ocean communities. Yeah, priorities is, it sort of comes back to the same thing so often, right? It's like we know ultimately how to stop it. Let's get away from fossil fuels. But the threats are happening, like the impacts are right now happening. So I think it's that serious conversation. Like, we have to get rid of fossil fuels. That's what we have to do. That solution is determined. But in the meantime, as we battle that path, of which some governments are doing better than others around the globe, is we have to think of what marine ecosystems going to lose, or what ecosystems are going to take too much of a hit. And there's some serious science in that area already, right? Like coral reefs are becoming pretty hard hit, as we've seen. So, that's, and like a wonderful metaphor, quote unquote, but like you're dealing with the environment and ecosystems, and everything is connected. And so when we're talking about global warming, it's a very complex discussion when it comes to our environment. So, and that's why we need that like serious, rapid move towards renewable, non-fossil fuel energy, for one. So and look, from AMCS's point of view, I'm sure I could speak on their behalf, even though I'm not there anymore, but seeing all the way around the country, fantastic marine heritage being hammered, and it's through global warming, but it's the flow-on effects in those imbalanced ecosystems. So, look, the priorities of Blue COP is that serious conversation.
All about the ocean.
Yeah. It's gnarly though, right? Like me and my mate dived down in Tassie 2 years back, so like off the east coast, Eagle Hawk Neck to be specific, and there was like giant kelp gardens there, with like not just living memory within my living memory, and to boot, a population of like the southern crayfish, I think, and that's not there anymore. Yeah, and like it's not a nice. No one likes that legacy. No, it's just be unfortunate that this is the situation that we're in. Yeah, and I often. I love taking pictures underwater. I love coral. Like, I'm all about coral. I'm a coral nerd. And they're fascinating. Yeah, they are. You could look at them all day. Recent times, that I've been over in Malaysia. I was there last year, and then I came back after the monsoon season 8 months later. And this whole reef had died in that time. And I actually, I have these very, very sad before and after pictures of what this reef was like when I left. And then when I came back, and I was working in sea turtle conservation there, and it's undeniable the flow-on effects that these changes have on the whole ecosystem, right? So the reef bleached, and that can happen in only the space of a couple of months. The monsoon hits a really fragile reef. It just like picks up all this dead coral and deposits it onto the beach, and that then throughout the monsoon season meant that the whole beach was washed away. And we came back, and we came back after the monsoon, and I mean you could see like the sand level of where these boulders like stick out of the sand, and you could see where the beach had just been eroded away. And then at night time, we're waiting for turtles to come up and nest, and they did. They came up, but the beach is just full of coral rubble, and there wasn't much sand left on the beach whatsoever. And what do they lay their eggs in then? Right? They couldn't, and they returned to the same spot. Right? Exactly. So there's their these would have been mums who had nested about 3 years ago. They have a cycle of nesting once every 3 years or so for greens. And it was just heartbreaking. Like, this mum came up like 3 nights in a row, came up onto the beach and would walk around for hours, try and dig, and she's just like hitting rocks, she's hitting coral, there's nowhere for her to go, and she went back to the sea, and then she came back the next night and still had no luck. And like, it depends on the individual turtle. One can be more picky than the other, and she was very picky, and we don't know what ended up happening with her, because one night she just didn't come back, and so the assumption can be made that she dropped her eggs in the sea. And like, that's, on this tiny little beach, you can just see how this ecosystem is just and then of course like your sociological like impacts, right? Exactly. And I'm I really feel, and that is the connection that we need to make. I'm fortunate enough to be able to return to these places and try and use my time to better these marine environments, but this is
the reality for that community, that really wonderful, warm community there in Malaysia who has welcomed me with open arms time and time again, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for that community there in the Perhentian Islands, for allowing me to come and be a part of their lives and try and help in some little way. But the fact is that these people live there and they rely on these coastal ecosystems for their livelihoods, and that is just being pillaged in front of them, and they have contributed very little to the climate crisis, and they don't get to just go away in the monsoon and pretend like it's not happening, because that's the reality for them, and that's not fair. But so I guess today, like we're, as I said earlier, we're on the eve of you having a pretty big adventure in Tassie.
Yes.
So tell me about...
A non-global warming related.
Yeah.
So that's actually not true. Yeah. You can't escape it,
Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can never run away. You can't even go to a tiny island and try and forget about it.
No.
But what... so where are you off to? And tell me about, like, your project. It's called Making Tracks. And, yeah, I'd love to hear more about it. And
yeah, and actually on that is we can't run away, right? And that's like, it's a really important point, I think. Even, and we chatted about it before, right? Like, I've taken time away from work, quote unquote work. I'm still don't have enough time to do everything I want to do, which is great. But yeah, you can't run away from these things. And I felt that was a big lesson for me, in that I wanted to take some space away from, like, the emotional sort of toll, but you can't separate yourself from it. So it's, yeah, you're taking that step back, but still it's yeah, it doesn't stop. Anyways, so yeah, making tracks. In a nutshell, I guess Making Tracks would be a platform, I suppose. Like, it's not an organisation, it's not a business or anything yet. But I started up a few years ago, and it's based around hiking, particularly long-distance hiking, like spots where you've got to pack a bag and spend a night somewhere or more. But yeah, it's hiking, and it's all of the effort I put into it. It's around increasing folks' understanding and then their appreciation for our amazing backyard. It's still incredibly amazing. And I suppose the overall desire is that through a great understanding, through a great acknowledgement of how special and unique our backyard is, an increase in that desire to protect it. Yeah, that's. And I suppose the little line I've come up with is that, you know, for every step of inspiration we receive when we're out hiking, we can give one step back in protecting or conserving or doing what we can, and acknowledging that that's different for everyone, right? Like, not everyone can do the same amount, but we can do something. And so, yeah, I'm a hiking nut. We're lucky, like, growing up, like, we've got a little shack in Tassie, but that was pretty much like our holidays would be going on a hike or hiking. And yeah, it just sort of evolved to but all my time was around hiking. And yeah, so I have Making Tracks. I've, like, put a book together in the past, and website and social media, all that sort of stuff. But basically, it's just grown into being like a hiking resource, I suppose. Yeah. And yeah, really centered around conservation. And so right now, despite taking a break from work, I still wake up and this is all I do. It's the best. But
do what you love.
I am, and it's great. And so I wake up in the morning and I jump into making tracks. And so, the last 2 months, well, I've done over 700 Ks hiking in the last couple of months.
Wow.
And I go to Tassie tomorrow. And I guess for those playing along at home, I'm walking the South Coast Track and the Western Arthurs and Duquesne Range, Frenchman's Cap, and a bunch of other ones. But I just love, I love how the pace of hiking, and there's nothing else is your own pace. Like a bike or a car or a plane, it's just different pace. And when you're hiking, you can stop whenever you want and check out whatever you want. And like a lot of skill sets is like the more you do something, the more you can learn. It's like I'm always learning, and that's what I love. And I can remember when I started, a big hike would be like an hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'm taking lunch with me as well. Now, that was a big hike, and now like
It's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and it's like literally a journey. It's we're like we were chatting about Loderderg, right? And so Loderderg is a beautiful little state park just outside of Melbourne, just under an hour's drive, and you can go there and walk for half an hour. Or I was there the other week and I did a 90k walk through Wombat State Forest and Loderderg State Park.
Just a slight jump.
And that's you just keep walking sometimes.
Yeah.
And so for what like main tracks holds in the future, who knows? I'd love to just see where it takes me, basically. And I'm always talking to people about hiking, and there's always something new to learn, but there's always something I can share with people. I've been helping out at the Victorian National Parks Association as well. And that's just sort of on my days off. I come back from being out bush and then just help out there a day or so a week. No, a day or so a week. A day a week. And then, and like they've got some campaigns going on, and one of them is their Central Western Forest campaign. And so Loderderg, as mentioned, is a state park, and there's Wombat State Forest adjacent to it, and that has been going through a process for over a decade now, where it's been recommended by the Victorian Environmental Assessment Council that it becomes a national park, and that's like an independent, or I think it's a statutory or independent body of the government that's recommended this, and so through hiking, ultimately, like when you're hiking, you want to walk through the best environment you can, which in itself poses a sort of catch-22, because you're always thriving, like want to get to the best, but then you can't ignore the environments that have had a tougher life, let's just say. But yeah, Loderderg and Wombat looks like it could be the Wombat Loderderg National Park, and so I've been hiking there a few times over the last month or so, a bit of bird watching and stuff too, and it's just, for me, I was like hiking there, I'm like, I can actually help this organisation who is trying to protect this in the long run. And I was out there last week, I was helping Shannon Hurley, who's the campaigner there, and the Wombat Forest Care and the likes, and the work that the little community's done there, scientific work, so like surveying and endangered and threatened species, it's incredible. There's this like amazing group. They've done an amazing amount of work, gathered an incredible amount of data, and then gone through it all voluntarily, and built up this really respectable portfolio of work for that area of the world. And hopefully it's turned into a national park, because that's what it deserves. And I guess stemming back to my work with AMCS and then being a ranger and stuff, is that, and you probably started me now, Crew, because I'm on national parks and I'll go on forever, but the concept of a national park, and it all, for me, like it started when I was in the States, and they have national parks, and I remember talking to people there, and they're like, our national parks are this and they are that, and they are the pride of this is at the best.
Yeah.
And you know, I was like, wow, okay, cool. And they are awesome areas of the world, which I went to, like, you know, like Alaska and Denali and places which are just spectacular. And I came back home and I'm like, oh yeah, national parks, what's going on here? And they really are. They're like so much to so many different people. But I think ultimately there's that biological importance of protecting areas, and how we go about that. Because Australia's evolutionary biological history is really quite unique. Like nowhere else can you go walking and find koalas. Or echidnas. Like they are evolutionary, two of a kind in the entire world. And that's pretty special. And so that's sort of what our national parks around the country ideally protects and sort of embodies, is people think of our unique landscapes and seascapes, and they want it protected. And so, I try and hike outside of national parks as much as I can, but ultimately, like, it's gathering photos and stories from those places and turning them into something and making tracks, and people seem to enjoy it.
For sure. I've been sharing the trail notes around my work, so hopefully we're going to go out for a hike together on your notes.
The Lurderderg.
Yeah, maybe not the 90-kilometre version.
But wind down. I wouldn't recommend 90 k's in 3 days. It's hectic, but like, and Victoria's just got spectacular. I mean, such as New Zealand, such as Europe, Asia, you name it. There's spectacular hiking.
But I think it's a cool thing that you're doing, you know, using like your passion and your passion for photography and writing and hiking all combined to, you know, share that with the world and really encourage people to get out there amongst nature, amongst our backyard. We need to understand it, we need to appreciate it, we need to spend time there to really, you know, understand what's at stake here. And you know, you're going to do it for some really amazing reasons, and I think that people could take a lot from that. And
hopefully there's a gem or two in there. It's there's that old saying, well, maybe not old saying, but you know, you protect what you love and you love what you know, and you know what you're like. You have to be taught sometimes, even if that's self-education. And the beauty of the bush or the sea is that there's always something to learn. Like, what do we know about the oceans, really? Like this tiny skerrick of information, and even that is beyond any one person. And you know, I was thinking about this the other day, like you know, like sort of more like the contrasts of landscapes. And say if you were just after a nice view, and like you could say, oh yeah, you've got Uluru and then you've got Wilson's Prom. Okay, very different landscapes, thousands of kilometres apart. But I feel like the more you learn about the intricacies of the environment, is you can go from, you know, King Lake, which is just down the road, to Lurderderg. Not even. You can go King Lake to Warrandyte, and you can see differences in ecosystems. So like this sort of stint of hiking I've been doing, like I went from Wilson's Prom to the Great Ocean Walk to then out past Portland on the Great Southwest Walk. And like, that was like 4 weeks, one then the other, then the other. And I even noticed like with the blue wrens, and so they get their plumage, like they get quite vibrant when it comes to like breeding time. And I noticed noticeable differences in the blue wrens between each of those. And then at the same time, like it was 4 weeks apart, but I was going from spot to spot and there's definite differences. And then also the wildflowers, so you don't have the same species in each location. You do have crossover, but you don't have the same, they're not all blooming at the same point. And so, you know, you narrow down, you're in Victoria and you're like, wow, there's a marked difference just within Victoria. And again, we've mentioned this before, but the more you start digging in that sort of like information hole of the environment is just, there's always something to learn.
Epic, yeah.
And it's like very humbling.
Definitely.
You know, like if you're bored,
Yeah.
then learn something about the environment
Yeah.
and then be humbled and
Yeah.
be like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like another point to be kind of humbled on is, only recently is the knowledge of Indigenous Australians being foregrounded and really appreciated for what it is. And I think that, that is just so important to integrate that into our national Australian discourse of, Indigenous Australians were here for tens of thousands of years before white colonisation happened, and the knowledge that was cultivated during that time is something that I can't comprehend, and I'm not even going to try to, because that's something that's like embedded within Indigenous Australians. And I think it's,
and in the landscape, right, in seascape, like there's this amazing symbiotic relationship, or like it's culture and environment is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And when you're hiking in some of the best national parks and most intact, quote unquote, national parks, is you can still see impacts of like colonisation, right? And so, load of dirt, going back to that, and load of dirt, wombat, like massive amounts of logging through there, and mining, and in the southwest, logging, the always logging, and there's some incredible photos of before and after, and then after again, and so you have like these ginormous trees, and you see them no more, completely bare hillsides, and then you have the forest growing back.
Yeah.
But those impacts post 1770 and post in Victoria post 1834 are quite extensive, and it's just we do have to have that more, I guess, and that Indigenous rhetoric, like how do we look after the environment? Well, they did it for so long. So the more you can incorporate, and we can incorporate that thinking as well as like just practical ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's our backyard, and how important is it to our culture?
Definitely.
It's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just recently learnt about the Budgebim cultural landscape that has just recently been listed as a World Heritage Site on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And so that's located in the country of the Gunditjmara, in the southeastern parts of Australia. So it's, a few hours west of Melbourne. And essentially the Budgebim cultural landscape recognises one of the world's oldest aquaculture systems. So it's at least 6,600 years old, and it's a series of lava flows that Indigenous Australians would use to trap and harvest kuyang, which is eel, for thousands of years. And this is an example where, Indigenous Australians have stewarded their landscape, their ecosystem, and had a thriving socio-economic system come as a result of that. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that, but there's also a lot to to celebrate that this has been recognised on a global scale, and this is something that we need more. That is just, that's amazing, and it's so cool to hear about your perspective, and the perspective of the non-governmental organisations in the international climate regime, things that we personally struggle with, like when we're thinking about all these issues day in, day out, and I think it's just it's always really important to think about a broad range of perspectives when we're talking about environmental issues in particular, because as we said, like it's all just so interconnected. Yeah, across industry, across social groups, and across countries, across oceans.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that'll be about it from us now.
Yeah, great, cool.
But thank you so much again.
Thank you, Cree.
Yeah,
no, that's awesome.
It's really cool. I wish you the best of luck in Tassie.
Thank you.
I'll be keeping up to date with your adventures. So if you'd like to also follow along at home for Jimmy's work in making tracks, there'll be a link provided in the show notes for today's episode. And I'll also pop in a link for the Australian Marine Conservation Society with their many campaigns that are always in need of support. So from the plastics campaign that we talked about, to preserving shark populations, to developing sustainable fisheries, there's sure to be a worthy cause of your interest and passion. So thank you, Jimmy.
That's great.
And thanks for tuning in, guys.
G'day everyone, Jimmy here. I've taken a break from hiking. Just for a few moments, I've found a nice little bit of hill with hopefully a bit of protection from the wind. I'm on the Kepler Track in Fiordland National Park on the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this is Ngai Tahu country, I believe, the Maoris. And it is spectacular. And why am I talking like this? Well, Cree has asked me to do a little bit of an update since we chatted in November, and touching on a few of the things we chatted about. I'm sitting looking at this valley, and this is relevant to what I'll chat about eventually, but it's a glacial carved valley, and it's this beautiful sort of U-shaped valley. So you can see where the bulk of the weight of the glacier would have sat in the bottom. And then at the top of that sort of bowl, you have these really gnarled, hummocky, rocky areas. And there's a few waterfalls falling, but with a bit of rain, this is a bit waterfall heaven. And there's not a tree to be seen. And it's all this golden green, sort of end of summer, sort of sun-bleached tussock. And half of the valley is in the evening sunlight and the other half is in the evening shadow, and it is divine. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. It's been a pretty hectic summer for those, for all of us and for you guys back home, and with the bushfires in every single state, but the size of those fires is ridiculous, unprecedented. Never seen anything like it. And I've been talking to a lot of people about those fires, and you meet folk from all over the world, and when they find out that you're born in Melbourne or Australia, the first question they ask you after that is about the bushfires. And then there's this string of questions and comments about the situation, about the life lost and property lost and the area damaged by it and the impact on wildlife and ecosystems, and then of course the queries and around the embarrassing response by our federal government and just the mess that it is. And some pretty interesting conversations and comments from people from all over the world. I'll be blunt, it's kind of embarrassing. Some other beautiful things about travelling and sharing news from all around the world and where everyone's at, you know. In a way, we're all in the same basket. We're all dealing with this global warming nonsense. Nonsense in that it's not something we should be dealing with. It should just be dealt with. But everyone's dealing with it in different ways. And Australia is just coming off as an embarrassment on an international scene. That's blunt and honest. So So yes, everywhere I've gone, all the little towns I'm popping into, there's fundraisers for Australia and for the bushfire relief. It's everywhere, in everyone's minds. And then here in New Zealand, you have glaciers. And I was lucky enough to be standing next to one a couple of days ago. And it was gorgeous, the Dark Glacier. It was quite a gnarly hike to get to it. And woke up in the morning, ice frozen over tent and shoes were frozen. And made our way down to the glacier, and it's fantastic. A beautiful, beautiful place to be. Unfortunately, New Zealand's lost 70% of their glacier coverage in 10 years or so. So that's one of the obvious impacts of global warming here in New Zealand, and one that a lot of the locals reflect on and talk about. I've noticed that through hiking. I've noticed it on my maps. A lot of the maps I'm using have glaciers on them, and yet I get there and there's nothing. You may hear in the background a kea, which is the world's only alpine parrot, flying around me, if it gets close enough. Very inquisitive, intelligent animals. So reflecting on the summer that has been, and what Corinne and I were chatting about, is stressing the importance of looking after ourselves and each other. And it's not a normal situation to live with the constant thought of the degradation of these beautiful natural places and the impact it's having on people. It's not normal. So look after yourselves, and always feel able to ask for a conversation, for a chat, and there's so many folk out there who are dealing with and talking about and feeling the same things. So do look after yourself and each other. Here it comes, the kea. Quickly on hiking, I'm walking the Te Araroa Trail, which is the national trail of New Zealand, and it goes from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island. It's 3,000 kilometres. I'm hiking just the South Island, so I'm up to about 1,500 kilometres now. A couple more 100 k's to go, and I don't want to speak too soon because I still have to get a visa, but I have a permit to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in the United States, which is from Mexico to Canada, a casual 4,200 kilometres. It's a bit bigger than this one. So on the hiking side of things and the making track side of things, trying to cram as much as I can into a year. If you have any questions about hiking or about trails, or you just want to check out some of the sweet scenery, feel free to drop us a line. Hey, makingtracksnow.com is the website, but at makingtracksnow or at It's Jimmy Nails on Instagram, the main sort of spots. Hey, and if I couldn't recommend this trail in Aotearoa any more. It is fantastic. Sorry, I couldn't recommend it enough, is probably what I meant to say. It's fantastic. It takes in a swathe of different sceneries, mostly mountainous, but a whole different levels of experience of people on the trail, different nationalities from all over the world. Every night, pretty much, you end up in one of these beautiful little huts, and you cook a nice little meal, get wrapped up in your sleeping bag, share a few stories, maybe have the old fire in the fireplace. It's New Zealand, and the South Island is set up. It's a hiking mecca. If not, I'm going to go out and say probably the hiking mecca of the world. So if you do enjoy tramping and strolling around, this is the place to be. So yeah, feel free to drop us a line if you want any cues on that. Cree, I think I've rambled long enough. Thank you so much for having a chat with me, hey? And yeah, everyone look after yourselves. I hope this ramble of ours is helpful. And any questions or comments or whatever, yeah, let us know.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Climactic, the flagship podcast of the Climactic Collective, a podcast network dedicated to lifting the voices of the climate community. You can find out more about the people behind Climactic and all the shows we produce at climactic.fm. We are a social enterprise podcast network, and we greatly appreciate your support. You can find a link to our Pozible where you can support us directly in the show notes of this episode or from our website. Thank you for listening, and from the whole Climactic Collective, keep up the great work and take care of each other in these climactic times.
The Climactic Collective.